Welcome back, everybody. We're going to do an authentication video today. So a while back I was sent this card. There was some controversy about whether it was an authentic misprint or not. See this corner right here? And so the owner wanted me to take a look at it. I also received this card right here. This is an autographed Japanese nickel bolus. Notice the Legends expansion symbol. Legends was not printed in Japanese. This is a Japanese Chronicles card. The reason I have it is because it has a white back. That makes it resemble an artist proof. However, Japanese Chronicles did not have any artist proofs. So the question is whether this is a misprint or whether this is an altered card. Removing ink is something that's sometimes done by people who like to alter cards. One popular way is to use acetone or some other type of solvent to liquefy the ink, and then you can wipe it off. This card's been partially done. This card's been completely done. In the card altering community, this is typically done so that you can make a custom card. So you can design your own card and print it on to this blanked front card. Some counterfeiters have even printed copies of real cards onto these blanks in order to try to pass them off as legitimate cards. I don't recommend doing that. You'll get caught. They're fairly easy to detect. This is more commonly done with foil cards. It's easier to do with foil cards, and people like to have foil cards for their custom cards. Eraser is another way that alterists blank cards. This is more popular for blanking small areas of the card, like if you wanted to make a black border card into a white border card. On each of these cards, I had a piece of tape on the right-hand side in order to create a straight line. Over here, we have some authentic cards for comparison. This first one is a Beta Artist Proof Fireball, signed by Mark Tadine, and numbered on the back, 41 out of 50. This one is a Fallen Empire's Initiates of the Ebon Hand, artist proof, signed on the back by Elizabeth Danforth. This one is a misprint. Just like an artist proof, this side is not printed, but the other side has both sides of the card. And this one is from Wizards of the Coast Research and Development a few years ago. This is what they use to print their playtest cards on these days. This is just a blank Magic card, unprinted on this side, and they would print directly on it with their playtest cards. Now, prior to having that machine, they would put a sticker on that. This card received tape on the cardstock before it was printed. So that printing is on top of the red tape. You can see at the bottom right corner the tape's been peeled up a little bit. That is unprinted foil underneath of it. So you can see there that the printing is on top of the tape. Obstructions like that are one way that a card could remain blank through printing. This is another type of obstruction. If a sheet were folded during the printing, the folded portion of the sheet would mask a portion of the card from being printed. This particular card was folded after it was printed, so it doesn't have a white space here. But the fold could have just as easily occurred during printing, in which case the area underneath that flap would be blank. This particular card was from the corner of the sheet, and the flap is still attached. But sometimes the flap can be cut off when the sheet's cut. Something like that might be what happened with this card. Here's another example. This is an Italian the Dark card, also with a blank back. Italian the Dark did not have artist proofs, so this is a misprint. For whatever reason, the back side of this sheet simply wasn't printed. Something like that could be what happened with this card. We're going to take a look and see if we can make a determination one way or the other. I have the microscope here to assist. First things first, let's take a closer look at the real cards and compare them to these altered cards. Okay, this is what a legitimate unprinted card back looks like. Notice this sort of texture or sheen? It's like a mottled pattern. The surface isn't perfectly smooth. It feels smooth to the touch, but you can see that there's differences. The cardstock is coated to reduce ink bleed. Basically, the coating makes the surface less porous. This is typical of what an unprinted card back should look like, whether it's an artist proof, or a filler card, misprint, or a research and development blank. Whatever reason it's not printed, it looks more or less like this. Special note here for beta artist proofs. They have a more glossy finish. The last step of printing is to coat the cards in a clear wear coat to protect the finish. The beta artist proofs do have this clear wear coating on the unprinted side, so that's why they're glossy. Here it is compared to the regular unprinted card, so you can see the difference. Here's the acetone wiped card. You can see it has a different surface finish. This card has vertical lines and maybe some very fine scratches from wiping the ink off. Here it is compared to the legit card. The solvent that's used to remove the ink also removes the coating that reduces ink bleed. So if you were to print on one of these acetone wiped cards with a liquid ink like inkjet, it would bleed like crazy. Your image would come out very blurry. Here's the acetone wiped card that's partially done. You can kind of see clouding in this area, especially right in here. That's where the solvent has damaged the clear wear coat. Here's some more. You'll often find it on the other side of the card around the edges, but this card has white borders. It's more noticeable on black border cards. When the ink gets wiped off, it often ends up on the edge of the card, so it stands out like an inked card. Now you don't see it here because this edge is not wiped off. So the ink was wiped off the edge right here, and that's why you can see it. Here's the eraser card. Notice how the erased area doesn't have that pattern like a legit card has. It's a different surface texture, a different sheen. Because the eraser doesn't liquefy the ink, it doesn't get all over the edge. I regularly hear that sandpaper can also be used to remove the ink from a card. That's a terrible idea. Sandpaper is basically a more coarse version of the eraser method, and sandpaper is going to leave scratches in the card surface. They're going to be very obvious. Sandpaper is used for rebacking a card if you want to actually make the card thinner and remove some of the surface material. But for removing ink, it's not ideal. Whatever you use to remove the ink, whether it's an eraser or the acetone with a paper towel or a cotton cloth, your surface texture of the card is going to match your surface texture of whatever you're rubbing against the card. Sandpaper is very coarse. A paper towel isn't exactly soft. Cotton cloth is pretty soft. The eraser is very smooth. Whatever texture you end up rubbing into your card surface, it's probably not going to match the original surface of the unprinted card. It will look white though, so you really have to be paying attention to authenticate these. Now we're going to take a closer look at the nickel bolus. Put it next to this legit card for comparison. Let's pop it under the microscope. First we have the legit card. Now the nickel bolus. Pretty much anywhere we go on the back of the card, there's ink remnants. Here's what the edge looks like. Compare that with the legit card here. If we take the nickel bolus and we put it in the stack of regular cards, it stands out. This card appears to be acetone wiped. Since it's a signed card, I'm guessing that someone was trying to pass this off as an artist proof. I visited with the artist of this card, and he confirmed that he never received any Japanese Chronicles artist proofs. The non-English sets that have artist proofs are Italian 2nd edition, Italian Ice Age, French Ice Age, Italian 4th edition, Spanish Ice Age, Portuguese Ice Age, Chinese 4th edition, and Japanese 4th edition black border. There's also some white-backed German limited edition black border cards that were not given to artists, so they're not artist proofs. These Italian the Dark white-backed cards, which are not artist proofs, again, not given to the artist. There's also a few Italian Lorwyn cards, which have a white back due to being misprinted. When I spoke with the artist, he told me that most of the Japanese cards that he signed were signed at GP Nagoya in the year 2000. Also, when he signs artist proof cards, he signs them on the back, similar to this. Having a signature or sketch on the white side of the card helps prevent people from doing things like this to regular signed cards. Now let's take a look at this one. Here's a comparison of the card next to a legit blank back card. Here it is next to the eraser card. See how the Selesnya card has that kind of mottled pattern there? And the eraser card's just smooth and blank in the affected area? Here it is with the acetone wiped card. Now I have checked the edges. They're very clean. There's no signs of acetone putting the ink over the edge the way that acetone would do. The card also has this line right here. This is actually a bump. You can feel it in the card. So this corner of the card is shifted up. Something was overlapping it and then they were squished together, which left this indentation on the card. Let's try under the microscope. All right, that's the card edge. Moving on in here. Notice how that black line there doesn't come all the way down to where the other colors of ink stop. This one also does it. The A does it. And then this is the card border, which only has the black ink anyway, so you wouldn't be able to tell. Here's what the card edge looks like. Down to the corner. All right, for comparison, let's take a look at the acetone wiped card here under the microscope. Here's where I put the tape at to create the straight line. On a foil card, you'll get a smear line of ink because the foil isn't as porous as the cardstock, and so the ink will actually smear across the surface. It looks like that doesn't happen on the non-foil cards. Getting up to the top edge here. All right. Now here's the card that was made with the eraser. All right. Here's the straight line. That's fairly straight right there. We must be getting to the top edge here. Alright, out into the white area in the middle. Okay, back to the card in question. In the print facility, each layer of ink is applied separately. That each color has a different edge position here on this microscope image indicates that the obstruction shifted during the printing. It reminds me a lot of this other card that I have. See, this also has the line right here where the cardstock is bent from being pressed together with something else. And in this one, you can actually see that the corner was bent before. That odd shape there, that's part of the card back that's been printed on this side where the paper was folded. So again, you can see that the obstruction moved and the different layers of color were printed in different positions. The edge is in a different spot there. And the angle matches pretty well. So it seems a lot like a less severe example of this card. Considering the evidence, my opinion is that this card is legit. That appears to be a misprint to me. So there you have it. This is the kind of thing that's a little difficult to capture on video or in a picture. Things like this can be difficult to authenticate over the internet. So personal inspection is usually the easiest way to go. Hopefully this video gives you an idea what you need to be looking for. It's a good idea to have some artist proofs on hand from the same era as whatever item you're trying to look at. You want your comparison item to be as valid as possible, so as close as you can get to the same thing. There have been some cardstock changes over the years. Something else to keep in mind when you're looking over stuff like this, artist proofs, filler cards, is that NFCs do exist. NFC stands for non-factory cut. So it's a real sheet of cards, but it wasn't originally cut in the print facility. Instead, it was cut by someone else, probably years later. In the case of artist proofs, the non-factory cut cards weren't supplied to the artist, so they don't have that personal connection. They're probably not going to be signed or sketched, and they're also going to be in addition to the quantity supplied to the artist. So if the artist got 50, you might be looking at number 51 or 52 of 50. It's something that's not supposed to exist. It's inflation. For NFC cards, you can check the provenance, try to see the story of the card, where did it come from, who were the previous owners, see if you can track it back to the original artist. If it's signed or sketched, that's a good sign. You can also look at the edges or the corners to see if it resembles other factory cut cards. Also check the size to make sure it's cut to the right size. Sometimes NFC cards aren't cut quite right. It's not unusual for NFC cards to be curled due to the sheet having been stored rolled. That's it for this video. I hope you learned something. Stay safe out there while you're trading for pieces for your collection. Catch you next time.